Hello, I'm Robert, voluntary fact checker and helping you if you're scared of many things. And this is for people who are scared about the idea that we might have nuclear bombs falling and stuff like that. And I've already done a big long debunk about that, so you can go and watch that. I'll put a link in the video description. But this is a basic misconception about fallout. And that nobody knows this shows that the government don't think that we are really at risk of fallout, or they would be on TV and telling us all about it. So few people seem to know much about fallout despite the name. It's really in the name, it literally says what it is. It's dust that falls out of the sky. That's what fallout is. So it's not a fog, and it's not fine dust. It's dust that gets pulled up with the explosion and mixed up with all the things that are actually going on in the nuclear explosion. It goes very high in the atmosphere, and then it starts to fall again. So it has to be quite heavy to fall, and it reaches the ground about 15 minutes after the explosion, and then more of it falls out all the way along the track. And basically the fallout it's shaped like the mushroom cloud. It depends on the wind is blowing, and you get a kind of silhouette of the mushroom cloud falls onto the ground as the dust. It's basically the mushroom cloud falling onto the ground. So that's what fallout is. And so it has to be quite heavy. Anything fine dust or fog, that's never going to fall to the ground. It would just spread out through the atmosphere, and there's lots of background radioactivity anyway. And your body itself is radioactive, and a small amount of radioactivity is not going to harm you. You're not going to get radiation sickness from it. So the fallout is heavy dust. The other thing that people get mixed up about, they don't know, is that they seem to think that fallout is permanently radioactive. Like that if there was a nuclear bomb today, then even a century from now, people wouldn't be able to live here. That's complete nonsense as well. The radioactivity is, so the more intense the radioactivity is, then the faster the nuclear atoms, the atomic nuclei, are splitting apart, because that's what causes the radioactivity, is the splitting atoms. And the faster they're splitting apart, then the sooner the original material has gone away and it's transformed into whatever it splits into. So the most intense radioactivity lasts for a very short time, just for seconds, the most intense, and that it halves. And say you had an element that halved every 3 minutes, just to give an example, then in 30 minutes, that's 10 halvings, then that works out as being, it reduces 1,000-fold. And then in an hour, it'd be 1,000,000-fold, and in 90 minutes, it would be 1,000,000,000-fold. So the most intense radioactivity of all, that falls off very quickly. But it's quite a complex situation, because there's a whole mix of vast numbers of different radioisotopes with different half-lives. And they all combine together to give this rather unusual curve, which is, it's just empirical, that every 7 times increase of the time for the first few days, the radioactivity reduces 10-fold. So, if the dust was a certain radioactivity like 1,000 at an hour, then after it would reduce to 100 after 7 hours of the intensity of the radioactivity, according to some units. And whatever the radioactivity is at 15 minutes, that's when it first falls out of the sky. Then it'll be a tenth of that after an hour and 45 minutes. So those are the two things that people don't know, and very few people know. And then this has consequences. It means that you can see the fallout. It's not just motes of dust in the air. You can see it, it falls on the ground, it's dust. If it falls on your clothes, you'll see that your clothes are all dirty with the fallout dust. So if you were out of doors during a nuclear explosion, then and you first of all you look away. You don't want to look at the blast because it could damage your eyesight. If you're far enough away, then you're going to get and then you get the blast wave, which is a big. It takes a while, tens of seconds to minutes or two. Then you might get a very strong wind. So you shelter. If possible, you very quickly find a place to shelter from a strong wind coming from the direction of the explosion, and you just duck down behind a wall or something, and then if you're out of doors. So that's then over quite quickly. Then you have 15 minutes to get to shelter, and just it's far more important to get inside within 15 minutes than to spend any more time than that looking for somewhere better to go. And then once wherever it is that you've got to, then you try and get as far away from the outside. You if the windows and doors have been if there's a strong wind, remember you're only worried about dust that's going to be blown around in the wind. So if it's just not very much wind, there's not going to be so much problem from having windows open. But if it's sort of wind that could blow dust around, if it's not a completely calm day or just very, very slight, then you might be worth putting a bit of effort to stop the wind blowing in. Putting things against the broken windows or whatever, and then just make sure you're well away and into as far away from with as many layers, things like bookcases are fine, books are fine, thick walls, just even under a table or something and surrounded by stuff and boxes or whatever. Just get as much stuff as you can between yourself and the outside. Get to an indoors room if you can, and if you were not able to get inside before the fallout dust started to fall, and if you have dust on your clothes, then it's not, you shouldn't go searching around looking for somewhere, go for a bathroom or for somewhere to wash yourself and soap and stuff. The most important thing, remember the radioactivity is most intense right away. So just get the dust off you as soon as you get indoors, by whatever means, and leave your outer clothes on the outside. And just make sure that you just look around, make sure you're not covered in dust. That's the most important thing. After that, you can wash yourself and so on if you want to. That will help as well. But the most important thing is get the visible dust and get rid of it and get out of the way. Get any clothes that are dusty off, brush dust off things, and just make sure that there isn't any dust lying around near where you are, and then get as far away from it as you can. And so the dust would likely fall on the roof of a flat roof building, so keep the ground floor is going to be better than the upper floors, and just keep as far away from it as you can, and then that will greatly reduce any risk of radiation sickness and be very low especially if you're quite a way away from the nuclear explosion. So those are the basic instructions, and those are the basic things that people don't understand. And so you get people just laughing. I just came across a couple of things where a video of on the Joe Rogan's show or something that someone was scared of, and both he and the speaker were both laughing away at this perfectly normal public health explanation of what you do in a nuclear if there's a nuclear bomb, and you can protect yourself. And don't listen to people who just laugh and say, oh, it's just like fog and you can't do anything, because they are the ignorant ones. They are the ones that haven't bothered to look up and find out anything about what fallout is. And they just haven't even twigged. It's actually in the word fallout. It falls from the sky. It's not fog. Fog doesn't fall from the sky. And it's not mist, and it's not gas. It's literally dust, and quite heavy dust. So then the main point is that I haven't had anyone tell me this. I know it from the Cold War. So during the Cold War, everyone knew this. In the 70s, 80s, everyone knew this. And back then there really was a risk of nuclear bombs. We all felt that there was a possibility, and you knew what to do if the nuclear bombs did fall. It was people didn't get scared about it; they just accepted it. It was part of your life. You didn't dwell on it, and it wasn't didn't think of it as being a big risk, but it was a possibility because we were in the middle of the Cold War and tensions were quite high. And there's nothing like that now. There's nobody telling us what to do. I'm not getting any signals from the governments that they are really concerned about their population and what they should do during, not like in the Cold War. And then if you go and listen to the US Ministry of Defense, they say no change in their nuclear defense posture since before the war with Ukraine started. And then if you go and listen to Zelensky and Biden too, when he was asked to elaborate on his remarks, then it turns out that the only thing they're concerned about is the risk of a tactical nuke, and it would make no sense. It would be rubbish for Putin's foreign policy. It would play very badly with China and India. It would be rubbish for his actual war on the ground. His soldiers would obviously be terribly demoralized if they are already. But imagine being on the battlefield and then seeing nuclear bombs and realize that your president has dropped nuclear bombs on the battlefield where you're fighting, and he hasn't told you how to protect yourself against fallout. I mean, that would probably end the war for the Russians. And the Ukrainians are far more disciplined and far better. They would quickly get information over their mobile phones about what to do in a fallout. They are far more connected. They would be told where all the fallout plumes are and be able to drive around them. And because the fallout is on the ground, dust, then in a fast-moving Humvees, they'd be quite a bit protected, and within a few hours, once the fallout has fallen away, down a bit, certainly the next day. And after 2 days, if you're indoors, then you could go outside, and it's really, really very greatly reduced fallout. So by then, if there ever was a nuclear bomb, then by then the emergency services would be there, because these are conditions where the emergency services would be able to operate, probably even on the day of the nuclear explosion, waiting a few hours, and certainly the next day. So, a reasonably well-trained emergency services, not just people who don't know what they're doing. And so in the same way, if there ever was nukes on the battlefield in Ukraine, then the soldiers, Ukrainian soldiers, would be far better equipped, and they'd be told by their superiors, well, actually it's safe now, as long as you avoid that plume there, and you could just drive through and go after the Russians. The Russians would be very demoralized. So there's no way that Putin's going to use them for the battlefield. It just leaves the possibility that he would use them just because he can, and for only for domestic purposes, making his foreign policy even worse, making the war even worse, getting the Ukrainians even more fired up to defeat the Russians, get the entire world to treat Russia as a rogue nation, and then based against all that, he would have his own personal, but his military bloggers are saying, go and use nukes, and he'd feel that he would get a bit of status at home for using nukes. That'd be his only reason for doing it. Absolutely rubbish reason, obviously. And to deal with that, or else just to prove that he can if other people don't and say he can't. And to deal with that, then the Zelensky and the US Defense, Jake Sullivan, they have communicated to Putin exactly what will happen if he drops a tactical nuke in Ukraine. And from the hints by General Petraeus, then one thing certainly, they said, target in the Black Sea. The only thing that Russia has there is the Black Sea Fleet. And from the evidence so far of the absolute rubbish air defences of Russia, it's non-existent against NATO weapons. It's very good against Soviet-era weapons, but just can't do anything against the most advanced NATO weapons. Then the NATO would be able to, and Moscow, which is the protection for the Black Sea Fleet, is already sunk, then by the Ukrainians, then it's pretty clear that the NATO could just sink the entire Black Sea Fleet if they wanted to in half an hour, probably. So they probably said to Putin, if you use a tactical nuke in Ukraine, and General Petraeus said a target in the Black Sea, I don't know what else it could be, then Jake Sullivan probably said, then in half an hour your fleet will be slowly sinking, just like the Moskva did. So that would be so humiliating, and if he felt he was going to pick himself up with the ultra-nationalist Russians by using tactical nukes, if half an hour later the Black Sea Fleet is sinking, which they have great pride in Russia, then that completely annuls annuls that. And so I think that is, I thought, always got the impression that it was exceedingly unlikely that Putin would use nukes, but with that, then just from the psychology of the man and what people, Zelensky understands him very well, then surely he's not going to do it. And Biden seemed pretty certain he wouldn't do it, and Zelensky too. And they've seen no preparations for him doing it. So, and I think the UK, US, I think they all know that. But for political games, and I have a separate article about that. I might do a video about it. It kind of shortcuts the decision-making processes if they just say they've excellent reasons for stopping Russia, but they just say we're doing to stop World War III, then that ends all the questions. It makes it much easier for them politically. And that may well be, part of the reason why they say it. And also, just to emphasize on Putin, Putin, counteracting Putin's bluff by saying back, we mustn't let that happen. And so just emphasizing back to Putin what a catastrophically bad decision it would be. But privately, Putin knows he's not going to get nukes back. He's just going to get the Black Sea Fleet sinking. And that would be just so humiliating. So, anyway, that's my short video for this basic misconception and then why you shouldn't be scared of nukes. And just think of it, this is something the politicians do. They've been doing it all the way through the war, every nuke, and I can do a separate video. I've got an article about why they do that.